Who here doesn't trust publishers? Okay. There's a few of you. So maybe in the media, that publishers have got a bit of a bad rap. Maybe we only really hear about what publishers do when things go wrong. But just to enlighten us, what do publishers do? What do publishers offer? Burgeoning indie startups or even AAA studios. What other kind of services or value can publishers bring to a lot of the people here in the audience?
A very common misconception is that publishers are money,
right,
which they can be, but not necessarily. Publishers are a bit like developers. Developers bring their creativity, programming, art skills, creation, etc. And publishers bring another kind of expertise in marketing, PR, trade, community management, trailers, playtest, QA, certification, release management, a lot of things. So it's just another kind of expertise, and you can sign with a publisher without any money input from the publisher, or you can sign with a publisher with money input, but it's not 100% necessarily. So it's just another set of expertise helping you bringing the game out there on different platforms, on different territories, because sometimes, it's pretty easy to put your game on Steam, but how to negotiate a deal with Epic Game Store, with Microsoft Game Pass, with Nintendo Japan, Nintendo US, Nintendo Europe, this specific store in Brazil where your game had some traction, how to do currency conversion, to get the right price on the different territories, how to program at the right time, price sales, a lot of useful things for your game.
That was very comprehensive, thank you. So basically a whole load of services that either folks in the audience could maybe do in-house, but maybe wouldn't have the time, or a complement of different services that they may not necessarily have the experience or resources to do themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's the experience that publishers bring to the table to be able to get your games out. Because ultimately, you want your people, want your fan base to actually play the games that you make. And with the burgeoning market, of course, the consoles are absolutely there. You want to have the games on there, Switch, so on and so forth, and of course anything else that comes by. Even if you're into VR, you're going to put your stuff on the MetaQuest, and that's another aspect of potential. How can we put this? Just red tape that you need to go around, because those I guess certification processes are completely different in comparison to what you would do if you brought the game out to, let's say, Switch, the Microsoft platforms, et cetera. And then even when you're thinking about Game Pass, that could be another whole situation as well too. But the publishers have those connections to be able to make those decisions help you make the right decisions for your game.
Okay, great. So that all sounds super valuable. But with investors, that's a different kind of relationship or scenario. So Erlen, from your perspective, what do you think investors do or can offer either game startups or game software startups or just tech companies in general? What is the value to a relationship with an investor?
Our game is kind of like we ask for money from other investors to invest in early stage startups, and then somehow we need to get that back. So we need to find a way to understand how can this game or how can this company actually return this investment in some way. So we do an analysis pretty early, and for our part, we're very interested in kind of like the team. We need to see a diverse team. That's really important, and it's not just gender. It's the whole team, how it's put together, how you actually work on it, what competence do you have. If it's just a load of developers and there's no kind of commercial part of this company, we'll be like, okay, there's something missing in it. So the diversity of the team is probably the main focus. And as we are a tech incubator, of course, the tech part is really important, and especially in the gaming, of course, you cannot build a game without understanding how you're going to build the tech. So that will be very essential part of our kind of like due deal or how we look for an investment. So the team, the diversity, and also the tech part is really important. And then trying to understand, okay, what are the mechanisms that are actually going to make this a success? Okay, how good do you actually understand who is your audience? And in gaming, it's probably even harder to find, okay, who are the individuals that are gonna want to play this game? Are they guy 43, as myself, never touched the gaming? Probably not. How can you kind of like reach this market and understand the probability of success? And that's kind of the main factors for our part.
Right. So in comparison to what maybe publishers nowadays offer, is an investor there just to provide money and like financial investment? Should people expect any greater support in terms of mentorship or resources or connections? What kind of role do you see investors playing with game studios?
I think investors I think you should pick your investors that actually can put something more than just money into it. So
Right.
if you kind of like end up with just money, that's a bad investor. That goes for all types of investments. If it's tech companies or if it's different, you have to find the ones that either can open doors, who has some kind of network where they can make your introductions better, in some way, kind of get you into places where you wouldn't be otherwise. How can they help you in the next level? Can they follow up? Do they have a network of investors that can follow up? So building a company, if it's a game company or a tech company, it's a long run, and you have to kind of be foresighted. You have to look forward to see, okay, if I'm going to be a success, I need a publisher, of course, but I also need other door-opening individuals, if it's investors, if it's mentors, and you should be pretty picky, because building a company is really hard. It's really, really hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. And you have to be pretty good at putting together your own team, but also your own set of advisors. And some of them are publishers, and some of them are investors. And it's only the best ones that actually manage to do that.
So you mentioned team a couple of times, and diversity of team. For investors and publishers, is it all about the product? To what degree does the team matter?
No, it's extremely important because, especially as publishers, generally we're not here for a one-time off and like one big hit with a game. We're here to build relationship over the years with 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, etc. At Focus, we are lucky enough to have studios from Sumo, from Asobo, from Dontnod, with whom we worked for on 2, 3, 5, even 7 games. So the good thing is that it means they're happy working with us, but it's also means that we need to check the team's consistency, the relationship, because it's like in a couple, you're going to work with them, you're going to be with them for many years. So the human touch, like how good you get along with them and how good they get along with you, is very important. Not only on diversity, but also on how the team dynamic works, meaning if they put a game together and you work with them, and if 3 months after the game release, they split, right. That's an issue for us as publisher. So we need to have
it's not just about a single point of contact, that CEO, that founder. How deeply do you need to investigate like the robustness of the team and the skill and knowledge within that team, would you say?
We do due diligence, and as developers should do due diligence on publishers as well. We do due diligence on exactly that, how the team works, its dynamic, how on social network, if there is no like offensive things put on, maybe a dying social network with a bluebird or stuff like that. Yeah, it's very important because it's important they do the same on our end as well. The image of one will impact the image of the other, and in the end impact the game's image. And the game, it's not only myself or the game CEO, etc. It's entire teams from both ends. So we don't want anyone from these teams to be impacted negatively by 1 or 2 people from publishers or developers and by comments or team dynamic. So yeah, it's game, team, budget, time, and quality.
So what happens hypothetically if we had a very high-profile rapper who had a lot of money and was very celebrity kind of profile and had $1 billion idea, but he'd started tweeting a lot of strange stuff? Is there a temptation to like run with that? Like, how would you balance it? This is brilliant, amazing idea, like this very famous figurehead, but with the penchants to maybe tweet some very strange or possibly offensive, potentially offensive messages. Like, would you dally with that possibility?
Not even a hypothetical. Definitely not. Because like you said, I mean, the image is everything. And the moment you kind of associate with that, people will hop onto it immediately. And that is a problem that nobody wants. And I feel bad for like the marketing teams that have to deal with all that stuff as well too. So like you said, everything that we try to, I guess, look for is hopefully, ideally, a reflection of what we want to be able to provide the gaming industry.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to looking for, I mean, that's a big question already. Maybe it's very dependent on publishers. In general, what are publishers and investors looking for then?
I think it depends on each publisher. Some publishers have very established editorial or portfolio, like Annapurna, for example, is doing very Hollywood-based, narrative-focused games. On our end, we're doing mid-core to hardcore, dark and gritty, action, adventure, FPS, and RPG and simulation games. We're not doing pixel art, 2D, casual, arcade, etc. It's not because we don't like it, it's because it's not our expertise. So as publishers, we want to provide the best of our expertise to developers. So it's something we're not the experts in, we're not going to try looking for them as games.
And on that note as well, too, it's very important for when you are planning to pitch a game to a publisher, ensure that publisher does match what you're trying to go for. I mean, we'll look at games regardless, but we only have so much time in the day to be able to look at everything. And so it's important that we are able to find the right stuff for, like you said, our expertise. And of course, to not waste your time, and please do that. Due diligence needs to be done on both ends, basically.
So it's kind of like maybe when you're applying for a job, you've got to tailor your CV for the right place. And if you're targeting a publisher, you've got to try and do your homework on those. Do you think it's worth trying to tailor your game design and put all of your kind of your hopes into one publisher?
You should always have multiple options,
Right.
just like with anything. And I think Catherine had a really good point when she was showing off her animation portfolio. Take off the stuff that does not, really make sense. And at the same time, also don't have your weakest bit in there, because we'll immediately look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't show your hand in that sense. It's very much a poker game if you want to think about it.
Yeah, okay, great. And for investors, again, is it very much focused on that individual, that group of like what is their particular, their niche, or what are they really hot on, what are they really interested in? Do you need to research them, or is it a case of trying to bridge some kind of gap, trying to introduce some new technology or opportunity to them?
I think we kind of like the way we de-risk kind of the investment side is to make sure that there are multiple ownership in the company. So the team has to be diverse, and so you have to kind of like identify what kind of competence do you actually have to make a success. And then we kind of make sure that those individuals that have the competence actually own the shares in the company. And that is kind of because, as I said, building a company is a 10-year. It's a short-term marriage for like 10 years. You're going to live together basically for the 10 years. You're going to work day and night for 10 years. There's got to be a team spirit, and they have to make sure that they convince us that this is a joint team vision. And then we kind of like de-risk it with making sure that, okay, this individual is important, this is important, and this is important. And they're part of the ownership, and they're going to make sure that this ends up being a success.
Right.
And then we do our own analysis, of course, of the market and of how they understand it and what their projections are. But in such an early stage as we invest, it's impossible to, and especially in gaming, it's very difficult in the beginning, because you never know if it's a success before you use millions of kroners to develop the game, and it's like, it's the market interested or not. But so in the very early stage, it's kind of like trying to de-risk and challenge each founder to understand the dynamics of the way going forward.
Right. Okay, well, just looking out again in the audience, I assume there must be quite a few students here. Who here has done a game jam, as a show of hands? Oh, wow, awesome, great, that's awesome. And who here's worked on like a group project that they've produced a game, vertical slice or something within 12 weeks? A few of you? Awesome. Okay, so that might be the seed of maybe starting up. Now comes the more interesting way. Who here is considering starting their own game studio, either now or in future? Awesome.
A lot of hands. Well done.
Great. So potentially some of you have got a great game demo or great idea, or maybe you're just in the design stages, which probably brings to mind the question of, well, what is a good time to approach a publisher? Is it when you have a design concept? Is it when you have a working demo? Is it when you have a vertical slice that is fairly well developed? Like, what is the optimal time to reach out and go to these events?
The earliest, the better, at least to start networking and making you known as a studio. Even if you don't have a build, you don't have a demo, you don't have a prototype, even if you don't have sometimes a pitch deck, just getting us to know you, who is the team behind it, where you're coming from, and saying hi, exchanging a few words, networking is the first step. Then pitch deck. So pitch deck is important not only because of like it's a tradition, but because pitch decks means that you already thought through and structured your game ID within boundaries of what is expected into a pitch deck. So it's already like a maturity check on how well you can do a pitch deck. And then pitch deck is the first thing. Some publishers or investments just need a pitch deck to start investing and doing like prototype funding or things like that. The majority of publishers, they need at least to have a prototype. Some need to have a vertical slide, which is way further into the production. But yeah, pitch deck, networking, pitch deck, prototype, vertical slice.
Oh.
Any difference of opinion? Or?
No, absolutely not. I mean,
You're fairly flexible.
Yeah, having worked on pitches for publishers and also vice versa, looking at pitches as well too. As Sumo Group does have a publishing arm in Secret Mode, we obviously looking at indie games. We've seen pitches come in at pretty much all points of the development, from that early stage where a nascent idea might be actually really amazing and you have a game in a frame and it's like, look, we can see this game with our roster. And they also have come after they've actually released the game as well too. Sometimes you can go to publishers and see if there's a fit and potentially help push out that visibility a bit more as well too.
Right. But say for maybe some of our folks in the audience, if they are fairly early in the games industry, maybe they don't have that reputation credibility, do you think that they should not feel reticent about presenting themselves early?
No.
Do they need to develop more of the game, or?
I mean, that also builds that networking, the business development aspect as well too. So the fact that you guys are here, or y'all are here, I think that's a great first step more than anything else. And I mean, I've seen lots of people talk to the speakers and everything like that. So just again, that seed of being able to present yourself, present your idea, that all comes from places like this. So the earlier the better. Again, like Iz was saying, you don't necessarily have to have the pitch deck, but you can just talk about ideas, and that helps you start brainstorming other things as well. Just like, oh, actually, maybe I should put this in whatever potential pitch deck that I have.
So the pitch deck sounds very important, presumably to both publishers and investors. What are you looking for in a pitch deck? Like, what is the structure or the content that is really going to pique your interest or prove that there's some seed of interest of that?
Well, outside of like the vision, you have certain pillars as well too, and of course the fact that you are targeting it to a specific audience, you also want to have that data behind that as well too. If you're doing comparative markets and whatnot, where does your game sit? If we don't see that, think things in that direction, that lets us know that you haven't taken it that far in regards to the research.
Yeah, there are a lot of free examples of successful pitch deck out there from the Backbird team. Rofery put some example of pitch decks, Tiny Build, etc. So looking out pitch deck examples, you're going to find a lot of them. I think someone mentioned another resources yesterday with free pitch deck examples. But yeah, basically it's transferring your game vision and structure and how you as a team will deliver it under a certain budget, under a certain timeline, and how relevant it is for the market. If you're pitching after Slay the Spire, it's been a few years now, another roguelite deck builder, it will have to be astonishingly unique, because there are like tons and tons of roguelite deck building games after the Slay the Spire. So it's extremely difficult now to be unique and to be sufficiently differentiating. Same goes for battle royale game or etc. like dying trends or slowing trends.
Games like Hades. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, this game's like Hades."
Yeah.
And I'm like, you really?
Yeah.
Is it really like Hades? Because it's a high bar that they set over there. But yeah,
And very important thing about the team, a team of young game designers, producers, etc. First game, first studio, but they work together as a team at university, high school, etc. for 5-7 years. Probably way more better team dynamic than a team of veterans coming from different studios with a lot of ego and very costly, very expensive. So from our perspective, sometimes young, functioning team with a good dynamic, with years of experience working together is sometimes way better than old bunch like me with a lot of ego.
Okay, well, that's great. You guys should definitely try that.
Well done.
Awesome. So the pitch is not just about pitching a concept and the creative. You do need to try and assess the market and where does this game sit within the market and maybe within that publisher's portfolio. But for an investor, how does that differ? What are you looking for in terms of structure and content for a really good pitch deck?
I think a lot of the criteria are pretty similar in many ways because at the end, it's the end product. It's a success when the publisher also has been able to put into all of it what needs to make a good game. So for investors, it's to understand, and especially probably for gaming investors, and we're pretty early in here, so we've only done 2-3 investments in gaming, so I kind of like put a very defined way of thinking from our part yet, but we're kind of like using what we've learned from the tech industry, also meeting the gaming industry. And so I think a lot of criteria will be the same, but I think also that regarding kind of like contact, I think it's what we're always looking at, both publishers and also the investors, is okay. What have you done since last time we talked? And that's often where I see people fail, because they come back and they kind of like tend to tell the same story which they did before. So come early, both to the publishers but also to us, to talk, to give an insight. Okay, what are you planning? What are you building? But make sure you remember what you said the first time, and then bring something new to the table. Because if you don't, it's like, okay, you're moving slowly, and that's a problem. So you have to move fast with little. That's the most important thing for investor. You have to be able to do a lot within every time we meet. And if we don't see that, we will hold our horses, and we will not give you good introductions to other investors also. And in the investment side, it's also important to understand what kind of area they do invest. Is it pre-seed, seed, or Series A? Where is their main focus? That's very important, because don't waste the time of someone who's actually looking for Series A or seed if you're in a very early stage in your development. So make sure you also do your homework regarding who you actually contact regarding investments.
Cool. So I think one thing that a lot of people struggle with is whether they're freelancer or whether they're businesses, the financials. And if we're going to try and estimate how much a game cost or business is going to perform in terms of like cash flow forecast and projections, particularly straight out of university, like what do you recommend? What are you looking for? Is this just like, stick a finger in the air and guess a number?
I mean, for game publishing? No, first, producers are important. So even if you don't have one in the team, try to find one to support you. There are some freelance producers, and Des, who was here, would strongly emphasize that. But yeah, producers can help you on assessing your game's budget, even if you don't have the expertise internally. Also, don't hesitate to reach out to other fellow devs. It's pretty, despite some examples, it's pretty like welcoming and supporting industry. So there are a lot of Discord community resources to get support and advice from other developers, studios, even publishers who can help you on tailoring your budget the right way. And mostly, it's not like, if there's a small mistake or it's not only on that you will be judged during your pitch deck. Of course, if you're doing a 2D pixel art on Game Maker and you're asking for 500 millions, then yes, that's an issue. But if it's like a small mistake or not like entirely tailored, it's not. We're looking for games, great ideas for games, content, gameplay, game design first. So that's part of our job also to help you achieving the right budget. So it's not entirely an issue.
Right. But, I mean, in terms of ballpark, in terms of like very small one-man indie game versus some kind of like a medium-sized indie game to maybe a larger game that you would hope to be a breakout hit, do you have like a ballpark figure of like what people should be aiming for in terms of budgets? Or what you would expect to, what a sensible kind of guesstimate would be?
That really depends, doesn't it? It can depend the type of game. It could depend on whether or not there's multiplayer involved, and that throws in another wrench into the system. So there are so many variables involved with that. So it's hard to say. I mean, sure, there are levels like, well, if it's an indie game, if it's like under $1 million, that sounds reasonable in the grand scheme of things. But of course, you do need to back it up if it's getting closer to the 7 digits. But yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily there are like, I guess, Halo ballparks, but it's something that we don't necessarily kind of are grounded in.
Right. But no, I mean, cheapest is not necessarily what you're looking for, is it?
No.
No.
That's one common mistake from developers pitching to publishers. They are afraid of asking big numbers, so they underpay themselves, they lower too much the budget, thinking, oh, the publisher is going to be happy. No, we're not going to be happy. We want you to, again, on the long-term relationship, we want you to have like a good salary and to be happy to work at the studio, not do crunch, so have good working condition. So don't underpay yourself, don't underestimate the timeline and put some too much into your milestone to do crunch, hoping that it will cost less. No. Sometimes publishers ask to raise the budget because, yeah, we see quality in your game, so sometimes we want to go even above and beyond, and we're going to increase the budget with you so that to give you the full means to get the best game possible. So underpaying yourself, under-evaluating is probably one of the largest mistake.
Yeah, it brings up more questions than it does answers.
Yeah. So I suppose really what publishers are trying to do is achieve the maximum potential for the game and the team, which is great to hear. But in terms of investment, when you look, maybe you look at financials, what are you looking for in terms of realism or ambitious growth?
Well, of course, we want to see, for our part, we're a very early stage investor, so we go in and take a risk very early. So at that point, it's almost impossible to understand what are the potentials here. But we do ask the founders anyhow to kind of like to do the job of projecting kind of like the budget and how many parts is it, and how many times will you have to pick up investments going forward. So it's an important part of it. When you're going more to seed investments, then you're closer to kind of like the revenue part of it, and you want to see more traction. You want to see maybe they have launched as a first part of the game, and what are the reactions of the market. So we're always looking for how can we see the effect of the product on the market. And we work a lot with the founders to kind of like to understand who is the market or who is the customer, who is the end customer. That's the easiest part of building a company is building the product. The hardest part is getting paid for it. And that is always the hardest part in every kind of company that is built is getting paid for what you actually made. And the earlier kind of you work with that kind of theme, it's the easier it is to get publishers, investors, and mentors, because then you really understand the dimensions.
Okay, great. So in terms of when people are delivering pitches, on the flip side, are there any red flags that you look out for? Like what should people not do?
Don't make the entire pitch just all text. I mean, it's a game, and we see the games. I mean, sure, like they're text-based games, but in reality, you want to be short and succinct. We only have so much time to look at these things. One of the things that I like to tell people building pitches, especially when they're early in the stages as well, too, is when you are trying to come up with the idea within our heads, what this game could be. A game in a frame is a great way to give us that vision of what you want to do. It may not be perfect. You can even have like gray box versions of what you're doing, but it gives us an idea of what to expect. Whereas, sometimes we get pitches where it says like, well, this game will look like Stardew Valley, but plays like Doom, and it's like, show me how that works, right? That would be awesome to see, by the way. But the best, really the best, or at least the ones that catch our eye, are the ones that give us those visuals within the pitch. So 'cause we need to see how the game works.
So when you say game in a frame, do you mean like a prototype?
Not necessarily. If you're not that far in development as well too, but you have an idea of what the game looks like on the screen, find a way to get that onto a picture.
Any other red flags, Yves?
Too much lore dump.
Too much lore,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Like starting your pitch deck. So first thing on the pitch deck, first, please put your contacts, because very often you will receive pitch decks out of nowhere, etc., with anonymous email address or email address not working, and there is no way to get back to you if we're interested. So please put your email contact somewhere. Not too much text. No lore dump, like starting your pitch deck with, it's a story of 3,000 years ago, this sorcerer, etc.
In a world.
That's not what we're looking. We're looking for gameplay, game design, etc. first. Being wrong on you can be wrong on the budget in a tiny way, but being wrong on the competition mapping and benchmark, and being over ambitious, like we're a team of 2, and we're making the next Elden Ring. Probably not really realistic.
Those have been out there.
Being very realistic on who your competition is in terms of pricing, success. Don't always put like only successful games within your competition, but having like one successful and being able to explain why this game was successful, and one average and one that didn't succeed, and being able to explain why you're going to do better than the one that succeeded. Yeah.
So why include one that didn't quite hit the market? Is that I guess some people might be afraid of if they show games within that genre that you're aiming for, that might indicate that that genre is dead or it's not very attractive. Like, what's the advantage of including a?
It's being transparent, and that's what we want to build the relationship on. So if from the very start you say, there's a risk. Yes, that's our job as publishers and investors to know that there is a risk. So we know that some games, if they would have been a recipe of 100% ensured success, then we would be useless first. So we know there's a risk. We know there are failed games. They were great games, great publishers, but something happened, like a COVID, like a war, like something, which are out of our hands as publishers, out of your hands as studio. So something can happen even with great games. So it's first just transparency, and also managing the expectation of how bad it can go, even with a good game, but how high it can go also. It's part of building the trust and relationship first.
Right.
Realism is important to kind of make sure that we understand the whole picture. And I think I totally agree with the team very early in the pitch deck. That is the product you're kind of like buying into. It's the team put together. But maybe before that, the vision, as you were to try to as early as possible to kind of like help us end up where this could shine. Where is the end goal, and in a very easy way without a lot of text. So text is the worst. Do not put a lot of text in it because we're not going to read it. So make sure that you can visualize it, your kind of like your vision in a very easy way, very early. I think that's kind of like the main points. And budgets at that point always will be, you will miss out on it. But if you miss out on understanding the market, and if you cannot have good answers on why you position the game where you mean, then that's a red flag.
And a great way to kind of sort of have exercises to help build that vision quickly, especially making elevator pitches is one way to do it. Also, potentially creating an ad for your game as well, too. How do you see yourself advertising the game to others? What do you think this game has that will make it stand out? And that actually helps build a pitch as
Yeah,
well, too.
that's
Pitch
great
deck, yeah.
advice. So I think you also mentioned a few games like Elden Ring and Hades, and maybe people see these trends and I really love that game. I want to jump on it and make my next game jam or my next student project based on that. Like, do you think it's okay to follow those trends? Is there a danger in doing that if a game takes 2-3 years? Or is that something that's very attractive? People like that game and want to see more.
Yeah, but comparing yourself, especially when you're a new studio, with an established IP for over 15 years, with hundreds of millions of budget, that's not being realistic.
No.
Because unless you already established an IP for over a decade and have hundreds of millions, you're not from software.
Right.
So you can use Elden Ring example or Souls-like example to explain some combat mechanics eventually, but not on the competition mapping, because you don't have the same means and background.
But maybe even technologically, like things like NFTs and blockchain, that's the whole new, people get very excited about these things and
that's
try and shoehorn it in. Is that something that people should try and chase in terms of game design?
I would say it's back on realism and knowing your markets, given
look
the
at
trends of
publishers.
NFT and blockchain
Okay.
right now. So that would be a red flag directly as well.
Right, great. Well, that's really great advice, and I'm aware that we've talked a lot so far, and potentially because so many of you very eagerly demonstrate that you've made games and potentially interested in starting up your own company and possibly pitching to publishers. I'd like to open this up to you guys. Have you guys got any burning questions about publishers that you've always wanted to ask? So if we can possibly raise the light a little bit. Okay, we've got a gentleman at the front coming
We got
forward.
one.
Hey.
Brave starter.
Hi.
Two. Excellent.
I'm
Howdy.
wondering what are the boundaries in a duration of a pitch, and how much energy should the pitcher bring into the presentation?
Oh, if let's say you're talking directly versus actually just sending a pitch for us to
Yeah.
initially take a look at.
Yeah.
I mean, you just show us that energy, and obviously that energy should reflect the energy you want to put into the game. Sure, we get the occasional pitches where it's like, well, it's a bit too much, calm down. But yeah, I think somebody had great advice in our last talk, or the Konsoll Connect, and they said, don't be a dick. And I think that's universal in general. And that definitely applies to doing the in-face pitches and whatnot. Because we've seen a lot, and we definitely know all the tells of like when things start going south and everything. So yeah, bring that energy, bring that enthusiasm. It definitely is important, because that lets us know that you actually care about the project.
I think on that note also, you said elevator pitch, which is, I think the most important isn't necessarily the energy you put into it. Of course, that would also up the game, but to work really with the words you use in your pitch are probably the most. If you got to try to say your pitch in like one sentence, you got to really put together a work to understand, because you will get, sometimes you will meet someone in a conference like this or somewhere else, and you probably only get that 1 minute to tell your pitch, and you gotta make some kind of interest. You gotta blow my mind. Wow, that's what you're doing, and when you kind of got the interest, you can bring on the whole pitch deck, and you can kind of like put us through all the details. But make sure that also in the main pitch deck you have this catchy kind of like phrase that this is what I'm building. And work with it, because there's always a better way to kind of like phrase it that really catches the interest of people, and just iterate on it, try it out, test it on colleagues, on friends, on family. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Test it on publishers and investors, and you will get feedback. Okay, this takes me directly to your end vision. I understand you. Because this is communications. You have to kind of like, you have to make us understand what you're going to build.
In terms of length, so generally if you have like official meetings with publishers during Meet to Match or Konsoll or etc., it's generally timed to 20 or 30 minutes. Since PowerPoint pitch decks, it's one slide equals 1 minute. To give us sufficient time to ask questions, then it gives you a hint of how many pages your pitch deck should be, to allow feedbacks and questions from publishers.
Thank you.
Sorry, what was your name?
Trond.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Great.
it does.
So,
Awesome.
so keep it economical, practice your elevator pitch, and I suppose bring some personality to
Absolutely.
that relates to the game as well as
Yeah.
great.
Also have multiple pitches with different lengths. I think that's very important too, because you won't necessarily have 30 minutes every single time as well too.
And just a little note: make sure that all the team members can pitch, because there's a big mistake. Always there's the CEO or the kind of like the founder or the main person. They always make pitch, but make sure all of the team members can do pitch, because you never know when you need to pitch, and there's always opportunities. So make sure everyone knows to pitch.
Great advice. Okay, next question. What's your name as well?
My name is Jørgen.
Jürgen?
So for this question, I first need a little prefix of information. So you three gentlemen have known like startup with games for a long period of time. How much roughly?
Are you talking about just the
Yeah, just how much, how long
general-
time you kind of like been in the
Oh,
business
right,
experience?
yeah. I mean, professionally, 11 years. Yeah, now that I think about it, it's such a long time. But you've been in longer than I have, so.
So over 25 years, but not as a publisher.
Yeah.
I started basically like you in MUDs, and then
These are experts. I'm a newbie, so I've been in banking for 13 years, and then I've been working with tech startups for the last 5 years. We've done our first investments in gaming the last 2 years, so that's not that far.
Yeah, so that was going to be like my follow-up question, because like Startup Lab is kind of like sticking out as in comparison, but there is like a lot of experience with tech. So Startup Lab has now started to like deal with game startups, which is kind of a different field. I wanted to know what is the experience of like difference, struggles, and how like is the impression of the games startups so far?
Well, we're very early, and that's kind of the hard part, because building a company is a 10-year project. So we've done our first investments this year and the start of last year. So it's a very early stage to kind of like to be able to give you some kind of history on it. So if you ask me in 3-4 years, we might be able to elaborate a bit on the experience of investments in the gaming. It's difficult because you don't know if it's a success before actually the game is out there and you see the end story. So it's pretty hard. So we're very ydmyk, humble going into this kind of part, and we're not sure where this will end up. But there's so much interesting happening around it, and we're also doing a bit investments on companies that are touching into the gaming industry. So we have Osirion, which is doing training tech for gamers to help them actually pinpoint and be better as gamers, and kind of like help gamers up their game. And we also have a company called GameFlow, who is more esports. A place to watch esports, also helping to see how can the industry start monetizing more, because there's so many people in the industry, but there are difficulties with monetizing for the teams and for the game producers. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. Norway is a small country. Startup Lab is a small investor, so we're just trying to see if we can do some interesting investments, and then we're going to, I think, learn a lot going forward.
So taking away volatility, kind of making it stable?
Yeah, we're trying to, I think the essence of it is we're kind of trying to learn more about the industry by doing multiple investments, both in game producers, but also in companies touching into the gaming industry. To try to understand, and in that sense, we're kind of de-risking it with having multiple companies doing different type of initiatives into the industry.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Ronan, and I wanted to ask, in what conditions would you say you would advise people against dealing with a publisher and likewise an investor?
Interesting question.
first, what is your project? Is that making a game or making a studio? Because in these two, maybe if your project is long-term studio, maybe signing your first game with a publisher will give you the know-how, the expertise, the visibility, so that on the second game, maybe you will have internalized that expertise and then don't need a publisher. So if your project is more a studio, then I would say it depends, because publishers would be useful at the start and maybe less if you internalize everything. If it's just a game, then you want to give the best chance to your game, so probably I would advise signing with a publisher. One very important thing, as publishers due diligence on your studio, do the same on publishers, so check out which games and studios they signed before, and don't hesitate to reach out to the studio to say, okay, how did it went, were you useful, what worked, what didn't work, etc.
Also get a lawyer before you sign a contract. It's very important. But yeah, I think a good, I guess, tell as well too, in terms of like, well, maybe this isn't going in the right direction, is that transparency with the publisher. I'm not, not naming names or anything, but there have been times where the communication absolutely just falls flat, and you may feel like you still need to be on the hook, simply because you've gone after a certain part of the development. But I think, of course, that's where legal resource comes in. But when that, I guess, that communication starts breaking down, obviously that is a great time to really look at those options of potentially pulling away and seeing what else is out there. Nobody wants that in terms of like that communication, but it can happen.
Yeah, I think it's a lot the same for the investor side. Do the due diligence on the investors also. Talk around, make sure you understand what are the, how do they work, what kind of network do they have. This is also be very sure of the time you pick up some cash from an investor, you kind of lose some control of the company. You will still control the company, but you still have promised to deliver something, so that someone will get their money back, and there will be pressure there if you're not able to convince them over that. So that's also to be very to make sure that you understand that also when you accept the investment, but make sure you talk around to understand the investor side also.
Yeah, to elaborate on that as well, I was thinking about startups that may not want investment at all. So, or under what conditions a startup or a game studio might say.
So how about, even if there was a game that was a viral hit, very early release, and it was already demonstrating like a lot of growth. Is that what you mean? It's already got organic growth.
For example, I was sort of curious of the use cases or sort of situations where a game studio or a tech company might say, we don't want investment. When would it make sense to say, does every company need investment?
No, it depends. If you need cash to get to the market, you will either have to have them yourself, or you have to get them from someone else. And in that case, there will be investors there saying, "Okay, I will give you the cash if you can convince me that there is a market there, or there is some way of getting to the market." But if the company can develop the product themselves without cash, of course, that's fantastic for the founders, and we have examples of those type of founders also, and that's amazing. But for most founders, they need cash, and they need the financial help from someone outside, and they will kind of want to see where you're going and understand. Yeah.
But there are also different types of investment, like angel investors, where that may be. That concern about people holding equity for too long, maybe that would be less of a concern if you can find people, friends, family, people who have wealth that might be willing to share that with you.
Yeah, but that's also very important to to look at who are the investors in the company and what do they actually bring to the table. So in an early stage angel stage, you might have some family and friends. But of course, going forward, they will not be able to help you any more than with the early cash, and they will not either help you with opening doors or being a network. So back to the whole planning of your whole trip, you have to understand how much cash do you think you need to get there, and you put on 25% or something to make sure that, okay, this is kind of, at least I need this. It's always more expensive than you think, because you always do something wrong going forward, and you have to go back. And try to kind of draw out, okay, how many times do I have to pick up the cash, and how much of the company do I actually have to leave? And if you're going to go to Series A or especially seed, the investors will demand that the founders own pretty much of the company. And if they don't own enough of the company, they won't invest because you don't have enough skin in the game. And if you don't have skin in the game, I'm not going to put money on you.
Okay. So I think we've got time for one last question.
Hi, hello.
Howdy.
I'm Bartosz. I'm in my final third year of my bachelor in game design currently. And I was just wondering, because you've discussed a lot about what you as investors bring to the table and what you expect from us. But as we've seen from the show of hands we did at the previous, at the start of the talk, there's a lot of skepticism about investors from our side. So are there any tricks or tips that you would have to young and inexperienced developers like myself to basically just not get ripped off? So like revenue splits and the money, just so we feel a little bit safer about actually making deals with that.
Yeah, the one thing, it's a bit like planes or trains. You always hear about the one crashing, but out of the number of planes and trains, etc., basically it's very safe. So publishers, it's a bit like that. You always hear of one or two out of the numerous publishing deals since the last 30 years that went bad, but it's a tiny portion, and generally the names are well known. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, yeah, like I was saying, always check with the studio who signed with the publishers. See how their games performed. That's the best way to see how the studio is being treated by the publisher, how the publisher is handling well the games by the studio. And yeah, it's pretty open, and even the publisher sometimes can say, oh, go talk to them, it went really well, go talk to them, we had some issues, but managed to solve it. Even publishers can give you.
And talk to other game developers, other that gone in front of you and been able to pick up an investment or publisher to understand, okay, what are the safest ones, what are the terms and conditions. For Startup Lab, we're founders first, so it's extremely important for us to be on the founder side, and so all of our criteria, all of our investment shareholders agreements, everything is open on the internet for everyone to use to make sure that these are the most founder-friendly kind of terms you have in the market today. We're also an incubator, so it's possible for all companies to come there without an investment or not from us. You will still be invited to be part of the ecosystem if we believe that you're able to do something, and we will also give you the advice of who to trust and what kind of terms you shouldn't accept and what terms you might have to accept based on the project or the domain where you are building something.
There's one very good useful resource is available. It's called Money Talks by Callum Underwood, previously at Robot Teddy. So if you look out on the internet, Money Talks, Callum Underwood, it's a talk he made at Games in Bavaria, detailing all the different deal terms, rev share, etc. Even if you don't know anything about it, it's a good example of what rev share is, what recoup is, etc., and how to avoid the pit and fall of this.
And I think Dino said it very best. Get a good lawyer.
Yeah, definitely get a good lawyer. And just remember that what may be a good deal for one studio may not necessarily be a good deal for you. Anything change. I mean, so much changes during the development, or even prior to that as well too. That can change this rev share, so on and so forth. So just be aware of that.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for all the great questions, paying attention. A big thank you to our panelists for today.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.